For 60 years, the distinctive thud, thud, thud of the helicopter's rotor blades have echoed across the battlefield, bringing hope to the wounded and filling the enemy with fear and dread. Based on expert opinion, audience polls, and technical comparison, we've constructed a 5-point matrix that will rank the top 10 helicopters of all time. At number 10, the iconic helicopter from the Korean War, an angel of mercy that went where others fear to tread.
Bell 47OH-13 Sioux. Manufacturer, Bell Helicopter. Type, General Utility Helicopter. Power plant, 1 Lycoming VO435A1B 6-cylinder engine. Principal armament, 2 7.62mm machine guns. Carrying capacity, 2 medical litters or 1,000 pounds cargo. Maximum cruising speed, 83 miles per hour.
The first of many U.S. Army helicopters to be named after Native American tribes, the Bell 47 Sioux was distinctive for its bubble canopy, exposed welded tube tail boom, and saddle fuel tanks. Its two-bladed rotor made a chop-chop sound, leading to the nickname Chopper for helicopters.
Basically, you had a crude airframe, an engine, a rotor, and a pilot. And it was kind of a no-frills helicopter, but it was one of the most popular helicopters ever manufactured.
Easily recognizable for its appearances in the smash hit film and television series MASH, the Sioux earned its reputation during the Korean War, a war in which helicopters first cut their teeth.
The Sioux becomes as famous as it is, well, first of all, because it's on MASH. Secondly, the Sioux is revolutionary in that it is the first helicopter that the soldier realizes is actually contributing to the battlefield. And it's what really whets the appetite of the American Army for more helicopters.
The Sioux made its name as a medevac, flying into hot LZs and taking wounded soldiers to MASH units. Of the 23,000 casualties evacuated to these units, over 18,000 were moved by Sioux helicopters.
It was called the Angel of Mercy when it was deployed to the Korean War, and I think it was universally loved by the folks on the ground. And for the first time, you could evac a casualty from the battlefield and have him in the surgical unit in a matter of minutes.
As grateful as the soldiers were, the medevac process did have its darker side. Its litters were pitch black on the inside, and for soldiers unfortunate enough to wake up in mid-flight, it could be a terrifying experience.
A soldier who was wounded quite often was put in there unconscious. And stories have been told by the soldiers when they got back to the aid stations that I woke up, I was in a very, very dark place. I could feel like I was flying, and I thought I'd passed away.
The experience for the average Sioux pilot could also be traumatic. Helicopters were continually exposed to enemy small arms fire and anti-aircraft guns. Even worse, the Sioux had minimal ballistic protection, making each medevac an exercise in heroism.
Crew member was exposed, basically sitting in a big glass fishbowl on the nose of the aircraft, so it was definitely a dicey situation.
Sometimes you sit there and you have to make peace with yourself that this may be the one insertion, the one extraction, the one direct fire support role that I do. It is so ugly, I may not come back out of it, but you still go in.
At the end of the war, the Sioux remained pivotal to U.S. operations, flying thousands of sorties in Vietnam. But it would always best be remembered for its service in Korea. The Sioux gets an average score for service length. Innovation is good, but fear factor is low. So this Angel of Mercy has to make do with the 10th spot in our list. At number 9, it's Hitler's pet dragon. A winged menace that rewrote aviation tactics.
Fokker Achilles FA223. Manufacturer, Fokker Achilles Flugzeugbau. Type, utility helicopter. Power plant, 1 Bravo 323 Q3 Fafnir engine. Principal armament, 1 MG-15, 2 551-pound bombs. Carrying capacity, 2,204 pounds cargo. Maximum speed, 75 miles per hour.
During the 1930s, a number of countries had taken an interest in helicopters. France had made early inroads, and America had the Sikorsky-designed R-4. But by the eve of the Second World War, Germany had stolen the lead with a pioneering airframe that would become a vision of things to come.
It was almost scary the way the 223 led the way for future designs, i.e. the Chinook and the H-21 and some of the other helicopter designs. The Germans were doing that in the late 30s and early 40s, 20 years before we even thought of it.
The first helicopter to achieve full production status, the FA-223 first flew in 1940. Nicknamed the Dragon, it was undeniably a beast. Measuring 40 feet in length and 80 feet from rotor to rotor, it could fly in the harshest environments.
It had a very good lifting payload. It was operated at very high altitudes. One showed to Hitler, even made the comment that I think we can use this in mountain warfare.
The Fuhrer issued an order for more FA-223s. In the meantime, the few existing models continued to break new ground, including undertaking one of the first medevac missions.
There was an example where a German pilot was shot down and was behind enemy lines. FA-223 and crew proceeded to go in and rescue him, so it was a capable aircraft when it came to search and rescue also.
Their utility seemed infinite. In September 1943, an elite commando unit led by Otto Skorzeny set out to free Benito Mussolini from prison. In what would have been the first ever Special Operations Rapid Insertion, the FA-223 was chosen to fly them in and out.
Now, it's not really a great success. Unfortunately, on the day they try to use the FA-223 to do this rescue of Mussolini, the aircraft don't work. But that doesn't matter. The thinking is there. The idea to use a helicopter for this kind of mission is there.
Despite their potential, most of Hitler's Dragons were slayed before they ever took flight. Allied bombing of German industry meant that only a handful of 223s were ever completed, and most of these fell into enemy hands. But even after its capture, it continued to break records.
The FA-223 was another design that the Americans and the British wanted to evacuate back for research and development. But the ship that they had assigned to carry these examples back was full, so they simply flew the aircraft with one of the original pilots under guard over to England, and it was the first helicopter to cross the English Channel.
The 223 may have ended up on the losing side, but in many ways it was a winner. Innovation and versatility scores are impressive, but with an average service length of just 2 years, coupled with low survivability and fear factor, this Dragon is holding fire at number 9. At number 8, the helicopter that has been the mainstay of the British Army for over 25 years.
Lynx. Manufacturer, Augusta Westland. Type, light utility helicopter. Power plant, 2 Rolls-Royce GEM 41-1 turboshafts. Principal armament, 2 20mm cannons, 2 70mm rocket launchers, and 8 TOW missiles. Carrying capacity, 10 troops, or 2,000 pounds cargo. Maximum cruising speed, 152 miles per hour.
Westland's Lynx helicopter first entered service with the British Army in the early 70s. In the years that have followed, it has proven itself to be a fearsome warrior, capable of adapting to and mastering a whole range of missions.
The Lynx is a great helicopter. Basically, it's the British version of the UH-1 and the Black Hawk. It does most of their heavy lifting. It has been adapted to troop transport, anti-submarine operations.
You can arm a Lynx and use it as an anti-tank system. You can throw soldiers in the back and use it as an air assault delivery vehicle. So it's a very useful airframe.
The Lynx's cutting-edge, semi-rigid titanium rotor head makes it superbly maneuverable and very fast. In 1986, a stripped-down Lynx broke the record for the fastest speed ever achieved by a chopper, recording 249 miles per hour.
It's a sports car. You turn a bank, you're right there quickly. Feels like you're connected. You are absolutely a part of that aircraft when you're flying it.
The Lynx has probably been most successful in its naval variant. With its folding tail boom and deck capture harpoon system, it can take everything Mother Nature can throw at it and spit it right back.
The Lynx is a very stable airframe. It has a reputation of being a stable aircraft in adverse conditions, crosswind situations. Therefore, it's ideally suited for operations in the North Atlantic and the North Sea.
It can also churn up the water with Stingray homing torpedoes, twin depth charges, or 4 Sea Skua anti-ship missiles. During the Falklands War, it attacked and deterred Argentina's submarine fleet. And in 1991, it again ruled the waves, sending Saddam Hussein's Navy to the seabed.
Go on, you beast. Go on, you beast. Take him, take him, take him.
During the Gulf War, it sunk a dozen surface craft and foiled attempted amphibious assault by the city of Khafji. So this aircraft has a distinguished combat record.
In the 21st century, the Lynx has been significantly upgraded. Hellfire missiles can be added to its payload, and newer engines have increased its carrying capacity by 20%.
This is an aircraft that can take it. This is an aircraft that I could take out there, be successful, accomplish the mission, and it's going to bring me back home.
The Lynx's ability to multitask gives it high versatility. With new versions in the pipeline, service length is also good. But compared to other helicopters in this list, the Lynx is low in innovation and has average survivability, making this the 8th best chopper in our top 10. Entering the ring at 7th in our list, it's the undefeated heavyweight champion of the chopper world.
CH-47 Chinook. Manufacturer, the Boeing Company. Type, medium transport helicopter. Power plant, 2 Honeywell T55L712 turboshafts. Principal armament, 2 7.62mm machine guns. Carrying capacity, 33 to 55 troops, 24 medical litters, or 26,000 pounds cargo. Maximum cruising speed, 165 miles per hour.
The development of the Boeing CH-47 series Chinook began in the 1950s. A twin-engine tandem rotor helicopter designed for transportation of cargo, troops, and weapons, it weighs in at an incredible 33,000 pounds and is 100 feet long when measured from its front to rear rotors.
How does a tandem rotor helicopter the size of a Greyhound bus make this list? If you look at the length of service for this thing, any Chinook pilot will jump in and say there are dozens of reasons that the Chinook deserves to be on this list.
The genius of the Chinook design lies in its 60-foot-long contra-rotating rotors. These eliminate the need for a rear vertical rotor, allowing all power to be used for lift and thrust. But the Chinook isn't just about muscle. This bird is fast and agile, too.
I have flown the CH-47. It is an extremely fast aircraft, surprisingly maneuverable. You forget that there's, what seems like a mile of aircraft in there behind you.
First deployed to Vietnam in 1965, the Chinook CH-47A was tested to the max. In just 2 years, it put in 161,000 hours of flying time, carried millions of passengers, and transported more than 1.3 million tons of equipment. In a single flight, it could carry a platoon of soldiers into the heart of battle. And with its dual hooks hanging underneath, it fast became the king of swing.
It can carry a 105 field gun. When you're talking about putting in fire bases into the middle of nowhere, the Chinook is your main mover. It is the prime mover for artillery.
Post-Vietnam, the Chinook's muscle has expanded, with improved engines and avionics giving it a greater mission scope. In peacetime operations, it has been responsible for bringing vital supplies into disaster zones. And in the Middle East, the Chinook has proved itself the #1 helicopter for high-altitude operations.
This is a helicopter that will keep flying for a long time. A lot of countries which previously got rid of their Chinooks as being too heavy, too big, and not as sexy as other airframes are now going back and buying Chinooks.
So despite being one of the longest-serving airframes in service, the Chinook is one old-timer that isn't ready for the retirement home just yet.
It's very humbling to admit that the Chinook will outrun an Apache any day. Invariably, we have to ask them to slow down because we can't keep up with them.
The Chinook scores well for service length, innovation, and versatility, while its dual engines give it greater survivability than most. But with almost no fear factor, this heavyweight tips the scales at number 7. At number 6, the most feared of all Soviet helicopters. Never smile at the Crocodile.
Mi-24 Hind. Manufacturer, Mil Moscow Helicopter Plant. Type, 2-seat gunship helicopter. Power plant, 2 Klimov TB3 117MT turbocharts. Principal armament, 1 Yak-B 12.7mm machine gun, 4 9M 17P Scorpion anti-tank missiles, 20 80mm S-8 rockets. Carrying capacity, 8 troops. Maximum cruising speed, 185 miles per hour.
Nicknamed the Crocodile, the Hind is a cold-blooded predator for the Cold War age. Capable of tearing through tanks, men, and machinery, it's seen battle on 3 continents and become a symbol of Soviet muscle.
If you're up against a Hind, what is it like? They're going to do a whole lot of damage because they do look ugly, they look mean, so it sends a signal.
Delivered to the Russian Army in the 1970s, the Hind was a unique concept in helicopter design, combining 2 very different roles within a single airframe.
They attempted to put 2 helicopters in one by having an attack helicopter that also had a cabin section which was large enough to carry troops. Now that would be attempting to do what the U.S. Army does today with a combined Apache and Blackhawks. They were trying to do that with 1 helicopter.
The result was a chopper that could carry 8 armed troops into battle and then unleash its payload. Air-to-ground missiles, 750 30mm rounds, 2 57mm rocket pods. The Hind wasn't so much a crocodile as a pterodactyl with guns and attitude.
It looks cruel with its little stub wings and its all those rocket pods and missiles underneath. It's the sort of lurking nightmare of any man who's ever manned a tank in a NATO army.
The Hind's bulk gives it significant protection against rifle fire and rocket-propelled grenades. In one combat mission, a Hind returned safely to its base with 20 bullet holes in its fuselage, rotor blades, and fuel and hydraulic systems.
The Hind is a flying armored bathtub. It'll take ridiculous amounts of fire so that really only the rotor and part of the airframe are still there, and it'll still have live soldiers in it.
The Crocodile's thick skin saved it time and again in Afghanistan, where occupying Russian forces became engaged in a long and bloody war. The Mujahideen nicknamed it the Devil's Chariot and used every weapon available to bring it down. When they failed, they turned to America for help.
It did very well in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan. So well that the United States decided that they needed to help counter that and introduce the Stinger missile to the battlefield.
They had to bring in the Stinger missile specifically on the largest covert action program ever run by the CIA because of this helicopter.
Hundreds of Hinds were shot down, its heat signature proving to be just one of many Achilles' heels. The Hind wasn't equipped with night vision. When fully loaded, it had to make a rolling takeoff. And more significantly, it had a tendency to chop its own tail rotor off when it banked sharply. But the Hind has endured, and operations in Chechnya and around the world have proved that the Crocodile still has plenty of bite.
It is just a mean, violent attack helicopter. The Mi-24 certainly can carry a lot, hang around a long time, and make life very difficult for the enemy.
The Hind scores excellent marks for fear factor. It also does well in service length and versatility. Survivability against small arms fire is good, but that heat signature and lack of maneuverability costs it dearly, leaving it 6th in the list. From the mighty Hind to something a lot smaller in 5th place.
OH-6 Cayuse. Manufacturer, Hughes Helicopters and McDonnell Douglas. Type, light observation and attack helicopter. Power plant, 1 Allison T-63A5A turboshaft. Principal armament, 2 7.62mm machine guns and 2 70mm rocket pods. Carrying capacity, 4 armed troops. Maximum cruising speed, 137 miles per hour.
When I first saw it, I wasn't necessarily impressed. I look at it with a different set of eyes now, with a lot of respect for what that aircraft has allowed some very brave people to do with it.
The teardrop-shaped OH-6 Cayuse was a small, sturdy helicopter with very low drag. Nicknamed the Flying Egg, it could perform maneuvers that would leave other choppers in a spin.
It could fly nap of the earth very fast and very low, and it could just get places that other helicopters could not get and perform observation functions there.
More importantly, the Cayuse is really, really quiet and very small. Because of that, you can use it for all sorts of things that bigger, slower, louder helicopters can't do.
In early 1968, the Cayuse was sent to Vietnam as a light observation helicopter. Nicknamed the Loach by its pilots, it worked alongside Cobra attack helicopters in what were known as hunter-killer teams.
You had to be an extremely brave individual to do some of the things that I watched Loach pilots do in Vietnam.
The Loach would fly low over the trees trying to draw ground fire, and the gunship would loiter at altitude. As soon as somebody was foolish enough to fire at the Loach, the Cobra would simply roll in with rocket pods and miniguns ablazing and take care of that issue.
These missions inevitably put the Cayuse directly in the line of fire, but time and again the Flying Egg refused to crack.
You can survive anything in it. All the pieces, parts, and all that might fly off if you meet with the wrong bullet in the air, and it may tumble around in that egg-shaped cockpit of it. But you get up, dust yourself off, and walk away.
Since Vietnam, the Cayuse has evolved. The latest AH-6 and MH-6 models are mainly used by the Special Forces, and its nickname has changed to the Killer Egg.
It's still flying in Mogadishu in 1993. It's still providing command and control systems in Iraq in 2005 because it is such a versatile little airframe for all those small things on the battlefield that need to be done by a versatile, nimble aircraft.
But being nimble means that this bird can't carry much weight, losing it marks for versatility. The Cayuse can carry a diversity of weapons, but on that small frame, only a few can be taken on any single flight, reducing its fear factor. Innovation is average, but service length and survivability are excellent, sending the OH-6 to 5th spot. At number 4, one of the greatest attack helicopters ever built. A coiled snake with a lethal bite.
AH-1 Cobra. Manufacturer, Bell Helicopter. Type, attack helicopter. Power plant, 2 General Electric T700 GE401 turboshafts. Principal armament, 1 M197 3-barrel 20mm gun, 16 Hellfire anti-tank missiles, 76 70mm folding fin aerial rockets. Maximum cruising speed 173 miles per hour.
In January 1965, Bell invested heavily on a prototype for a radically new chopper. Taking the proven transmission, rotor system, and the turbo shaft of the Huey UH-1, they designed a tandem seat helicopter that had only one thing on its mind: all-out attack.
The Cobra is the granddaddy of the attack helicopter. It is the first idea that someone said, hey, these helicopters are pretty cool. Let's put lots of guns on them and use them to shoot people.
And the Cobra was designed for that task. Like a Western gunslinger, it was slim at the hips and fast on the draw.
It had a unique tandem seating arrangement, a pilot and a gunner, front and back seat. This made the aircraft extremely narrow. Therefore, it was pretty hard to hit and pretty hard to see in a high-altitude dive.
The Cobra went into full production just as the war in Vietnam was expanding. The need for closer air support for troops on the ground had become a priority, and the AH-1 would be flying straight into battle.
The unit I was in, Aerial Rocket Artillery, we were a extension of the field artillery. What we were responsible for was direct fire in support of the infantry on the ground, just as a cannon artillery might do, except we could fire very, very close, up to 50 meters from the front line trace of the soldiers on the ground.
By getting close to the enemy, the Cobra was able to make full use of its weaponry. A 20mm cannon tore holes through the jungle canopy, and its rocket pods were capable of taking out vehicles and entrenched positions.
A lot of American soldiers viewed these things reverentially. These were avenging angels. You go into a hot LZ and you're screwed. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes this machine that can just wipe out everything in the jungle outside of you. All those nasty things that are scaring you and making your life very, very difficult.
But if Cobra pilots were snake charmers who learned to love its speed, stealth, and lethal bite, they also came to respect the airframe as one which would take them into tough situations and get them back out again.
It just blended with me. It was easy to operate. It was dependable. It could stay airborne for a long time. I felt like I understood every aspect of that aircraft.
Upgrades and improvements in recent years have kept the aircraft up with the latest developments in engine technology, fire control systems, thermal imaging, and infrared countermeasures. Now known as the Super Cobra, it can be armed with Hellfire, sidearm, or Sidewinder missiles.
It changed what we did. It showed us the value of having a dedicated aircraft that you can't haul distinguished visitors in, that you can't go pick up mail in. It's just going to go out there and do one purpose: to support the American fighting infantrymen.
As a dedicated attack helicopter, the Cobra scores low in versatility and only average marks for innovation and survivability. But with a service length of over 30 years and a fear factor that's up there with the best of them, the Cobra ranks 4th in our list. Before we see the top 3 best of the best, it's time to have a quick look at a few of the best of the rest, the choppers that just missed the cut of making our top 10 helicopters. The Boeing Sikorsky RAH-66 Comanche, a heavily armed stealth chopper, stunning looks, and even more stunning price tag. The Russian Mil Mi-26 Halo, the largest chopper in the world, and the first production helicopter to boast an 8-blade main rotor. And finally, the V-22 Osprey, a medium-lift, multi-mission tilt-rotor aircraft that operates as a helicopter when taking off and landing, but converts into a turboprop aircraft during flight. A vision of the future? Perhaps, but not good enough to make our top 10. coming in at number 3, it's one of the greatest helicopters of all time. The sound of its rotor blades has become a legend in itself.
UH-1 Huey. Manufacturer, Bell Helicopter. Type, utility helicopter. Power plant, 1 Textron Lycoming T-53 L13 turboshaft. Principal armament, 2 7.62mm machine guns, 16 70mm air-to-surface rockets. Carrying capacity, 11 to 14 troops, or 6 medical litters, or 3,000 pounds cargo. Maximum cruising speed, 115 miles per hour.
The Bell UH-1 Iroquois, better known by its nickname, the Huey, first flew in 1956 and is still in service today. Over 16,000 models have been built, the largest production run of any helicopter in history. And with numerous appearances in blockbuster films and television shows, it's become an American icon.
The image of the Huey, the sound of the Huey, is what most modern people associate with modern war. It is certainly what they associate with Vietnam. That particular sound of the Huey, the whoop, 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 coming in over tall grass, the red marker smoke, rotating, puffing like an angel's wings through the rotor wash. That is an utterly iconic image, one not only familiar to the Vietnam soldier, but to soldiers around the world and since.
The birth of the Huey came in the wake of the Korean War, a war in which the American Army learned that for rapid medevac and troop insertion, a faster, more robust helicopter was needed. To achieve that aim, the guys at Bell developed a radically new bird that pushed the avionics envelope.
It was the first helicopter that the United States Army purchased that had turbine engines in it. And that was a big step, going from a helicopter that worked off of reciprocating engines to a helicopter that had turbine engines in it. So it was kind of like going from your Volkswagen to your Cadillac.
The Huey's capabilities were put to the test during the Vietnam War. By March 1970, the U.S. military operated more than 3,900 helicopters, and 2/3 of them were Hueys.
The Huey is burnt into the memory, certainly of any Vietnam veteran, for the simple fact that the Huey was so many things to them. It was what brought them into battle, but more importantly, it was their deliverance from battle. If you were short of ammunition, what brought it in? A Huey. If you were wounded, what took you out? A Huey.
As a medevac, it proved indispensable. Of the 390,000 American soldiers wounded in Vietnam, 90% were lifted directly to a U.S. Army medical facility. Many of these men survived because they were treated within what doctors called the golden hour. But saving lives was just one aspect of the Huey's role in Vietnam. As a troop carrier, it could rapidly insert up to 12 men in battle. And later in the war, it was heavily modified to fulfill an attack role.
The Huey was the beginning and the end, the alpha, the omega of warfare in Vietnam.
But if for the soldiers on the ground it was a case of love at first sight, for Huey pilots it was a case of love at first sound.
The Huey noise is distinctive. It announces in some cases during Vietnam that here we come, which is always not bad. You know, to be deterred, you got to know you're being deterred. And the Huey coming after you, you may not want to do the second iteration of what you were about to do.
But not everyone was deterred. The Huey still took plenty of fire, and with minimal ballistic protection, its crews were heavily exposed. Over 2,000 UH-1 pilots and crew lost their lives during the conflict, making it one of the deadliest jobs in the American military.
To be a Huey pilot, you either had to be crazy or have balls of steel. Not necessarily because the aircraft wasn't a good aircraft. It's a fantastic aircraft. It can do amazing things. But the problem was the way they were using them tactically. The Huey is often going into places where there's a lot of small arms fire, a lot of hostile fire coming in. So Huey pilots had to go into incredibly dangerous situations.
Since Vietnam, the Huey has constantly evolved to meet new challenges. Its rotors, engines, and avionics have undergone countless upgrades, ensuring that the Huey legend will live on.
It has a place in everybody's heart, starting with those Vietnam veterans, going to the folks that served in Europe later, served in the Middle East. We even flew Hueys during Desert Storm. So it means something for the soldier. And I think for the American public, it means Army aviation.
The Huey has stood the test of time. Service length is excellent, as is innovation, versatility, and fear factor. But lack of survivability keeps it out of the top 2 chopper spots. At number 2 in our top 10 list, it's a Hawk that can swoop down on the battlefield, delivering men, weapons, and material. A helicopter that has put itself into the line of fire, taken hits, and still comes back for more.
UH-60 Black Hawk. Manufacturer, Sikorsky Aircraft. Type, multi-role medium helicopter. Power plant, 2 General Electric T700 GE701C turboshafts. Principal armament, 2 7.62mm 6-barrel miniguns. 16 Hellfire anti-tank missiles. Carrying capacity, 11 troops, or 8,000 pounds cargo. Maximum cruising speed, 160 miles per hour.
By the late 1970s, the Huey was looking long in the tooth, and the Army arranged for a competition to find a replacement. Sikorsky won that competition, and the Black Hawk was born.
If the Huey is the helicopter identified with Vietnam, the Black Hawk is the helicopter identified with post-Cold War operations, with everything since the fall of the Berlin Wall.
You almost, in our military, will never go anywhere without them. Some number. Doesn't have to be a lot, but what it gives you is the versatility to influence the situation you find yourself in.
Nicknamed the Night Stalker, the Black Hawk is an evolutionary airframe. With its large cabin, it can fulfill a number of mission sets, including medevac, reconnaissance, command and control, and resupply. It can also take 11 fully armed troops into battle and has the capability to carry a formidable payload of missiles, rockets, cannons, and electronic countermeasures.
As an evolution from, let's say, the Huey, it is a much more modern aircraft. It does have integrated night flying systems. It does have integrated navigation, GPS systems. So whereas the Huey pilot might have to have a crumpled map folded on his lap to figure out where he's going, the Black Hawk pilot has things like heads-up displays and night vision to get him where he's going, night or day, and to the exact place he needs to go.
The Black Hawk's many innovations have made it a favorite with pilots across the world.
As a pilot sitting in the Black Hawk, it responds very nicely, very comfortable in high winds, very comfortable in adverse weather. It's almost a magical experience for me as an old Army aviator to watch the confidence, and maybe that's the best word, the confidence that the Black Hawk gives our Black Hawk crew.
The Black Hawk first tasted action in Grenada in 1983, and it's been involved in every American campaign since. In 1991, the Black Hawk played a key role in the ground war to liberate Kuwait. 300 choppers carried 5,000 troops of the 101st Airborne deep into Iraqi territory, and the concept of a heliborne assault was invented.
Black Hawk performed very well in the Gulf War. It had some problems in the desert like all other aircraft did with sand. Improvements were made to the airframe to overcome this, and it's operating there as we speak today.
Of course, no helicopter that goes into combat is indestructible. On October 3rd, 1993, 2 Night Stalkers were shot down over Mogadishu, and the phrase "Black Hawk down" passed into legend. As tragic as that incident was, it hides the fact that the Black Hawk is a gritty survivor, as well as having protective armor that can withstand hits from 23mm shells. It has an array of cutting-edge safety features.
The Black Hawk has had the greatest record on crashworthiness of any of the helicopters in the U.S. military today. The crew seats will stroke 12 inches, so that means when the airplane hits the ground, their seat strokes 12 inches down, which absorbs an enormous amount of energy. And there are photographs of crashed Black Hawks in which the thing is totally destroyed, and you get a picture of the crew seats. They're intact. The two pilots got out totally uninjured.
With over 1,500 U.S. Army Black Hawks flying worldwide, this backbone of America's helicopter fleet looks like it's going to be around for a while longer.
If the maintenance office issues you a Black Hawk, it is going to be flyable, no matter how much inspecting you do on it, and it is going to take you out into harm's way and bring you back every single time.
The Black Hawk's unrivaled survivability scores it high marks, while its versatility is also impressive. Innovation marks are good, as are service length. But with a low fear factor, the Black Hawk has to settle for second place. Before we find out what the #1 helicopter is, let's count down the other choppers in our list. At number 10, it's the helicopter that saved thousands of lives during the Korean War, the Bell 47 Sioux. At 9, the oldest airframe in our list and a true pioneer, the German FA-223. Just ahead of it, the Lynx, King of the Seas, and the only British helicopter in our list. At 7, it's the weightlifting champion of the chopper world, the CH-47 Chinook. At 6, the Russian Mi-24 Hind. Nicknamed the Crocodile, it's got a lethal bite. The fast, small, and highly maneuverable Cayuse is at number 5. Fourth in our list, the Cobra attack helicopter. It's been around for years, and it is still delivering the goods. Into our top 3, it's a true American icon, the UH-1 Huey. And just missing our top spot, the UH-60 Black Hawk, the best utility helicopter in the world. And finally, at number 1, the best of the best, the attack helicopter that replaced the Cobra to become the deadliest chopper in the world.
AH-64D Apache Longbow. Manufacturer, the Boeing Company. Type, attack helicopter. Power plant, 2 General Electric T700 GE701C turbosharks. Principal armament, 1 30mm automatic cannon, 16 Hellfire anti-tank missiles, 76 70mm folding fin aerial rockets. Maximum cruising speed 165 miles per hour.
The Apache would have to be the most intimidating looking weapon systems ever developed.
The intimidation factor, the fear factor of this aircraft, it just looks bad.
It is a mean-looking helicopter. It is scary. It gives fright to the enemy.
The thought of being on the ground and looking up and seeing an Apache come around for another turn, you get out of there. That's why it deserves to be #1.
First entering service in 1984, the AH-64A Apache was America's answer to Cold War fears of a Soviet ground attack in Europe. The result? A $20 million can opener with state-of-the-art technology.
The Apache is the response to thousands and thousands and thousands of Russian tanks. So the idea was field a modern, high-tech, guided anti-tank rocket and put it on a heavy airframe with lots of targeting systems on it.
Built to endure frontline environments, it can operate during the day or night and in adverse weather using the integrated helmet and display sight system. It's also equipped with some of the latest avionics and electronics, such as the Target Acquisition Designation Sight, the Pilot Night Vision System, Black Hole Passive Infrared Countermeasures, and Nap of Earth navigation and GPS.
When you bring the Apache to the table, you bring an extremely complex and technical machine.
I almost see the Apache pilot as just another black box in an aircraft full of black boxes. You've got this almost Terminator machine that's going into your right eye with a heads-up display and the image from the infrared camera, and it just feels high-tech. It's almost playing a video game. In fact, the guys that make the best combat Apache pilots, you could say, were good video game players as teenagers.
But attack helicopters aren't about computers. They're about delivering a knockout punch.
The Apache is an immense, incredible weapon system for destroying almost anything that causes you heartache on the modern battlefield.
The Apache has a pretty large gun on it. It's a 30-millimeter gun that fires high explosive rounds at about 650 rounds per minute. It also has a laser-guided missile, the Hellfire missile, that saw its first real use in Desert Storm, where the Apache was tremendously successful.
The Apache's high-tech capabilities, combined with its awesome offensive armament, makes it the helicopter that pilots want to fly.
Having flown the Apache, I can safely say that after my first flight, I didn't want to fly anything else. Everybody wants to fly the Apache. Even if they don't say it, they think it.
When you sit in it, there's a sense of strapping the whole aircraft around you, and you're actually pretty much surrounded by armor. So the overall sense is, you know, I'm dealing with a big dog here.
And when the big dog was let out of the kennel during the Gulf War, it proved that its bite was bigger than its bark. On February 27, 1991, Apache attack helicopters and A-10 ground attack aircraft hit the retreating Iraqi army on the Basra Road.
They simply took out the lead vehicle and the trail vehicle and just annihilated the entire convoy. It was also the aircraft that fired the opening shots of the Gulf War. It took out the radar sites and cleared the way for the air war to begin.
Although the Apache was already the dominant helicopter on the battlefield, in the mid-90s it was upgraded to the AH-64D. Fire and forget Hellfire missiles became part of its standard payload, and a new radar system known as Longbow was added. Sitting above its rotors, Longbow gives the Apache truly awesome capabilities, including the ability to detect and classify more than 128 targets, prioritize the 16 most dangerous, and initiate a precision attack.
That gives you an ability to attack a target array and start shooting on it very, very quickly, because it's taken what you are looking for, what your commander has told you to go out and do, and it's translating it and processing it very rapidly for you.
But perhaps the ultimate testimony to the Apache is its ability to deter the enemy without firing a shot.
The Iraqis, when confronted with the Apache, basically surrendered to the aircraft rather than take it on in combat.
The mere presence of Apaches means that the bad guys aren't going to do anything bad to our ground guys. When we fly, guys don't die.
Our #1 helicopter has impressive stats, awesome fear factor, high innovation, great survivability, and a service length that's going to extend beyond 2020. So a helicopter that can outgun, outthink, and outperform the opposition has been named the #1 in our top 10 list. It brings fear to the hearts of the enemy. It can take hits and still bring its crew back home. The Apache really is the best of the best.